Hey guys, so today we're going to be resealing this rear diff. Let's get this thing started. Now if you saw from my last video, my breather was basically caked up with mud and she got this whole thing pressurized and all the fluids leaking out. So we put in this breather extension and now we can pull out that third member and reseal that whole gear assembly. First thing we'll do is drain this rear diff. And what you want to do first is crack the fill open with a 24mm wrench. Then we can open up the drain. Looks like it got a lot of mud and crap on there, so we'll take a wire brush, just clean that up real quick. That fucking sucks, guys. It looks like there's a ledge that basically formed here. That's preventing my socket from fitting in. I guess I smashed that onto a rock and caused that. I'll take a Dremel with the burr bit and then just clean up all that burr right around that lip. Okay, first setback of the day addressed, so let's crack this drain plug open and then get her drained completely. I'll just open this up all the way. There we go. If you are disconnecting the drive shaft from the third member, make sure you have a paint pen to mark that out. I marked this out previously, so I don't know if you can kind of see that. There's a faint white paint there. And same thing on the flange right there. So I'll be able to at least get these back on together in the same orientation, because this will prevent any future vibration.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
So what we're gonna do now is disconnect this drive shaft. So I'm gonna brush off threads. Now I'll undo it with a 14mm on a wobble socket, impact wrench, and 14mm wrench on the other side. Hopefully we don't have to do too much wrestling here. I guess we're wrestling. There we go. And that's the fourth one. I got my jack stand. Hopefully catch this and not drop it. Two by four with a hammer. Let's break that loose. There we go. Now mine did come off very easily because of preparation. Like, I've had this drive shaft off multiple times. I did put anti-seize on the flange, and I also did put Loctite on those threads so it doesn't have any of those the corrosion binding it up. So preparation before your assembly is crucial to make it easier for your future self. We'll just set this to the side. I think I should have enough room here to undo this. So as you can see, those threads are all caked up. Pain in the freaking ass, guys. So we'll clean them up so we can at least get a wrench on there. I'll have to disconnect this air line to the locker so we can get this completely off. The flats are at least exposed on this fitting, and now I'll just dig out the rest of these areas here. Let's undo that air locker fitting, and that's a 12mm wrench. There we go. Now we can undo the 14mm nuts holding that diff against the axle housing. So that third member is completely unbolted, but the axle shafts are still mated to the gear assembly itself. So what we'll have to do is get those hubs to stick out just by about 1.5 to 2 inches so that it disconnects from that gear assembly. Now this part of the work, what we're going to do is undo the brake line from the axle housing so that it's completely floating. And after that, we basically stretch it out just a little bit so we can pull out those axles and basically remove it from that center gear assembly from the third member, so we can pull that third member out.
Now I've gotten some hate with regards to that technique, and I'll tell you why it's not always a good idea to pull the brake lines out.
Now, if you do take out the brake lines from the connections at the hubs, like right there, there's a high failure rate if you undo the threads at those connections. So the brake lines could be corroded on there, and if you have to take vice grips to undo them, you'll have to splice in a new fitting. Number two, you're gonna have the fitting seized onto the brake line itself, and that will basically cause more leaks in the future. And I'd rather just stretch it and then put it back than have the risk of redoing brake lines. And keep in mind, we're not taking the brake line and bending it back and forth like a paper clip. We're just bending it very slightly and then bending it back. Now we can take our 12mm and undo those brake line brackets to the housing. We can take our wire brush and then just brush those threads at the hub of the wheel bearing. And we'll hit those threads with some WD-40. I ran out of my nut buster, which does work better, which is basically a liquid wrench on an oiling can. And we'll just undo those nuts with a 14mm wrench. Now would also be a good time to undo your ABS harness. I did just run into a little bit of an issue where I'm trying to spin this last nut, and as you can see, it's not going to come out because it's spinning the stud instead. And this will happen if you've already replaced your rear wheel bearing and you reuse the studs, because reusing the old studs, it's not going to seat as tightly as new set would, since it actually uses like a interference fitting. So what we're going to have to do at this point would be to remove the drum and get some needle nose vice grips to grab the head of the stud so we can undo this nut. So let's get to removing this drum. My first attempt, I'm going to take this pry bar and basically hammer this drum outwards. I already have the drum brakes loose, so we could work on removing that. So all I'm doing is getting this pry tool in between this flange here and the drum, just hammering towards me. There we go. Alright, these drum brakes look pretty thin, so I guess I'll have to replace these too. Now, I got the needle nose vice grips on the head of that stud, and we should be able to undo this nut on the opposite end. There we go. So these other ones were able to seat properly because I did end up putting some red Loctite on the head side of these studs, but red Loctite will only work so much, especially if those interference fitting is super loose. It's really not going to work that too well. So now we can basically pull these hubs out. I'll take a hammer and this 2x4 here just to basically break it loose. There we go. And we'll take this deep socket here. Take this deep socket. This is about 3 inches actually. This deep socket is about 3 inches, as you can see here. And then we'll just take it pinned up against the stud and have the hub basically separated from the housing like this. So this time we'll take off the ABS harness first. We'll take our brush, do that whole thing again. Brush off all the dirt and debris. I found some PB blaster this time. Should work a little bit better. Hopefully we get lucky this go around. Undone. 2, 3, 4. Not out of the woods yet. Last one. And 4. Definitely got lucky on this side, guys. Now you can take a brake line here and just bend it forward, actually rearwards towards the center of the axle housing. 2x4 again. This hammer towards me. Separate the hub from the housing. There we go. Again, we'll take our socket, pulling that brake line back again, and then just basically pulling this whole thing back. Now, this may require some finagling of the brake lines. There we go. That's definitely a good thing I pulled the truck in halfway. I'd be soaked by now. So right now, this third member is basically free from the axle housing and everything that assembles to it. So we should be able to break it loose. Just take a hammer, work it against this housing. See if we can rock this back and forth. All right, I think it's broken loose. So this thing weighs like, I don't know, maybe like 60 pounds, 70 pounds. So just be careful when you do take this off. Yep, that shit's fucking heavy. So there she is, guys, having it rest on that 2x4, so it's not getting marred up by concrete. But yeah, that's fully removed now. Put it up on the truck bed. I think that fucker weighs like 80 pounds actually. That shit is heavy, especially in a very cumbersome situation. Now, almost wrecked myself with pulling it out earlier. I didn't get a good hand grip, but luckily I was able to slowly drop it to my abs of steel.
And we want to pump you up.
As you can see, she's very dirty. So when you do, of course, do this maintenance, it's preferable that you do it right on the maintenance interval. I do the rear diff fluid every 33,000 miles. So this is just about that time. And what we'll have to do now is basically clean up all of the old gasket material around that flange there, as well as take a rag and then just wipe off any of the debris that we can visibly see. So here I'm taking a razor blade, microfiber cloth, and some brake cleaner, and basically scraping off as much of the old gasket material as possible so that the surface is prepared for the new gasket. It's definitely good to go around and clean up your nuts.
That's what she said.
And washers that holds that diff against the axle housing, especially if you had a pretty bad leak.
Many tic-tacs later.
Here, I did a practice run with how I'm going to mount that third member onto the axle housing. Once I was happy with the technique, I went around with a microfiber cloth and brake cleaner to give those mating surfaces a final wipe down.
So this is the final moment. This time I'm applying 1 minute gasket so that we can get this truck back into service, as I do have another trip coming up very shortly, and I got a few other work that needs to get done. So we'll squeeze this right onto that mating surface, making sure I go around the studs as well. Nice 1/8 to 1/4 inch bead all the way around. This time I'll do a little different technique to ensure that we have a nice even spread. New glove. Just spread that out a little bit more towards the center there. Alright, new glove. Same technique as earlier.
You'll definitely have to be very careful not to touch those cleaned mating surfaces with your gloves so that we can ensure that we have a good seal.
There we go. And push from the bottom. That's it. I think that's as far as I could get it by hand. We'll get the hardware now, tighten it up. For this, got some blue Loctite. You definitely want to apply that onto these threads, since the diff is definitely a high vibration area. And we'll just go around and tighten these things down. This is a 14mm socket. Now we can go around, torque those things down. Those nuts, according to the service manual, 14mm, 18 foot-pounds.
Make sure you torque this down in a crisscross pattern.
And we'll just go in a circle. So now it's definitely a good opportunity to clean up the mating surfaces. Rag with brake cleaner on here, so we can get as much of the grease and gunk out of there. Make sure you don't damage your seal either. So I'm gonna hold the seal here. This is a separate rag without brake cleaner because you don't want to damage the rubber on that seal. Wheel bearing grease onto the bearing surface here on the shaft. That's this surface that you see here, because that's where the shaft seal basically rides against. So you'd want to clean that surface up and reapply some wheel bearing grease so you get a good seal. And wheel bearing grease on this this O-ring too. And now we can take some anti-seize. I'm going to be applying it on this inside edge here of the mating surface so that we have those two surfaces from binding, from corrosion and rust. So definitely good practice in general to always use anti-seize on mating surfaces. Now we can push this hub back into the axle housing. Might need to rotate the wheel a little bit to get this to line up, but yeah, that's it. Put a little bit of anti-seize on those threads. And these 14mm nuts, we torqued them down to 27 foot-pounds. All right, that's good. We can put the ABS cable back. And the same exact thing goes here on the driver's side. That's a good time to put some anti-seize on this fitting for the air locker. If you have an air locker, we can reinstall that fitting. And we'll just snug it down with our 12mm wrench. And that's good. We can clean up the mating surfaces for those brake line brackets. And we can also carefully bend back those brake lines and secure them in place. So for this driver's side hub, I'm just going to clean up those surfaces, apply some anti-seize, and put everything back together. I'll be ordering the brake drum as well as the brake shoes, and I'll be replacing this in the next few weeks. Now, it would definitely be good to clean up these mating surfaces with a brush. And take some anti-seize on the finger and put it on the mating surface of the drive shaft. Now we can take our drive shaft and then just slip it right over flange here, making sure to line up those paint marks just like that. Already have some Loctite on this first bolt, so line it up, put it in there. And these nuts and bolts we torqued down to 65 foot-pounds. I'll have to pull the e-brake on this one, guys. You have to make sure to torque this down in a cross pattern too, guys. Alright, I'm just gonna go around one more time, a circle. Now here's a little bit of a tip if you're going to be mounting these heavy tires onto your truck so you don't break your back. What I typically do is I roll this basically onto my thigh, just like that. And I use my other leg to hold it up. So you're saving your back a little bit. I got the truck back on the ground, off of the jack stands, with the wheels torqued out and everything is basically assembled. Only thing left is to fill up this rear diff with our gear oil. And since I did do the re-gear, it is recommended by those guys at East Coast Gear Supply to use this Lucas Oil 85W140. So that's what I'm going to be using. But first, we'll have to reinstall the drain plug. This is already been cleaned up with a rag. You do have to be mindful of that magnet, since it will carry a lot of metal shards. So clean that up, put it back on, and it's a 24mm, torqued down at 36 foot-pounds. Now we'll just fill up this diff with the fluid and basically just keep filling it up until it starts barely overflowing from that fill hole. this will take a little while since this axle housing has been emptied down completely.
Moments later.
All right, filled up now. Let's torque this fill plug in. That's also 36 foot-pounds, 24 millimeters. And I think that basically wraps up this work, guys. So hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you smash that like and subscribe button if you haven't yet. And if you haven't seen our new products,
We just released this dome light molly panel for storing and organizing your gear onto the ceiling, and it's also equipped with super bright LEDs.
so definitely make sure to check that out if you have a second gen. That's it for today's video, guys. And until next time, peace out, everybody.